California's Golden Parks is made possible by Toyota, who is committed to keeping the air clean at all our beautiful parks with its hybrid Synergy drive technology. In vehicles like the innovative Prius, Highlander Hybrid, and the Camry Hybrid, lower emissions and higher gas mileage help hybrid Synergy drive vehicles create a minimal impact on the environment. So take a deep breath, relax, and enjoy another one of California's Golden Parks.
Well, hello everybody, I'm Huell, and here we are on this beautiful morning, believe it or not, in Yuba County, about 30 miles north of Sacramento. I say believe it or not because at first glance, you might not even think we're in California. In fact, you might not even think we're on this planet. Everything here is very barren and desolate, but we have been told that it's barren and desolate for a very specific reason. A reason that ends up making this one of the most historic places in all of California. We're going to be spending the whole day here because this spot, even though it's very barren and desolate, is one of California's golden parks.
I love you, California. You're the greatest state of all. I love you in the winter, summer, spring, and in the fall. I love your fertile valleys, your dear mountains I adore. I love your grand old oceans, and I love a rugged shore.
Okay, our adventure begins amidst all of this barren desolation, and our tour guide today is Dean Swickard. Dean, you know, I've been wanting to come to this spot for a long time. I've seen pictures of it, but the pictures really don't do it justice. When you get here, you're kind of overwhelmed by what you see, and I guess now it's time for you to explain to everybody exactly where we are.
Well, we're in the Yuba Gold fields along the Yuba River about 10 miles east of Marysville, and this was the heart of much of the gold mining, the most productive gold mining in California during the turn of the century.
All right, now when you talk about gold mining, most of us think of panning for gold or going in the hard rock mines back in the mountains. This was a different type of gold mining, wasn't it?
This is a very specific kind of very industrial strength mining where they used huge dredges, bucket line dredges that could go down 75 feet and bring up material, process it, spread the material back on the land, and then extract the gold.
All right, and these dredges were working up and down the Yuba River, and there's the river right over there. So basically what would happen, the dredges would be in the water and they would just be scooping all this stuff up and just dumping it over here?
Well, actually the river's been moved about a mile to the north, and so the river that we actually see today is not the riverbed that was there historically. That would be here further to the west.
So was it moved because of the dredging? I mean, there was so much of this going on that it actually moved the river?
Right, the river was actually moved a bit north. They dredged the area south at one time with as many as 21 of these huge dredges, which were just turning up the landscape, and they actually built their own ponds to float in as they moved.
Wow, this is amazing. Now, when you talk about the turn of the century, you're talking about the 1900s, not the 1800s, the 1900s.
Yeah, the dredging here really started around 1903 and continued on until actually just a year or two ago when the last dredge was taken out of operation.
This is amazing down here. When you look, I don't want to fall off here. It's historic, but it's not worth giving up a broken arm or leg for. This is amazing looking down here when you think that every bit of this is dredged up material.
Yeah, these are dredger tailings, and what you see are where the material was deposited behind the dredge, and that's why you see sort of long ridges, and they have a scale-like or a serpentine look. You can see little lines, and that's how the back of the dredge was depositing material back on the landscape after it was processed.
And what do you call all of these hills? Is there a name for? Are they just called tailings?
They're called dredger tailings. Yeah, dredger tailings. They're the tailings left after the dredging operation occurred.
Wow, because you wonder, it's kind of interesting, you lose some perspective being up on top looking down, but this whole elevation of this area has gone up, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's probably, these mounds are 40 and 60 to 80 feet above the normal level or elevation of the ground surface.
So if we scraped all of this away, we would be back down to what was topsoil, where things were growing. And I mean, that's why these trees are growing down here.
Exactly, and that's why you see ponds in the distance.
Yeah.
You get down to a normal elevation.
So you can tell where it used to be by looking at the trees.
As the technology improved, they were able to mine deeper and deeper.
And the piles got higher and higher.
Yes, they did.
Boy, this is something when you get out here. It's just, it looks like everything's been turned upside down.
It has literally been turned upside down. That's exactly the situation. This is a landscape turned upside down.
And at the time it was done, was this technology considered cutting edge? Was this a good way to get at the gold?
This was state of the art, and the dredges that were produced here went to many other parts of the world where they duplicated this technique.
All right, well, before we leave this point, let's just get one more shot out here, because I don't know how this shows up on television, but you are just overwhelmed. Are most people, when they come back up in here, do they even know what they're seeing?
Well, it's a moonscape. I mean, it looks like something most people have never seen before. You see it a little bit in places, but never on this scale.
Okay, now it's time to get up close and personal with these tailings. And Dean, when you get down here in these things, there's rock everywhere. And when you start looking at this rock up close, these are basically just rocks that were in the riverbed.
Yeah, definitely. The river lost velocity here, and so this material was deposited in a huge lens out here, or what makes up the Yuba Gold Fields today. And that's where the gold settled out. The heaviest material, of course, settles out first. Miners came back in and started dredging it, took the gold out, and of course, and redeposited this, 10,000 acres of rock.
And what kind of rock is this? Just river rock? Does it have any use?
Well, it's river rock, and of course, it has uses for construction, aggregate, and that sort of thing. This also is an area that has a very high quality sand, and the rocks are high in silica content, which gives them some value in today's markets.
In what way?
Used for paint additives, abrasives, specialty uses.
But back then, when they were doing all this dredging, they were just looking for gold. They could have cared less about the rocks that were left behind.
Absolutely, they were after the gold, and today we just see new values in some of the resources left behind.
So all of this rock would have been either on the riverbed or right up beside the riverbed. This is literally river rock that was dredged up and piled up.
Yeah, it was river rock. Some of it also was washed down the river from the hydraulic mining that took place higher in the watershed from about 1880 to about 1900.
So some of this rock has come from how far away?
Well, about 30% of the material here probably came from as far as 50 miles away,
You're
60 miles
kidding.
away. Sure.
That was blown out of the hillside with those big hydraulic water.
The water cannons, you bet. And what it did, it washed the hillsides down, put it in the river. In some places, that material was 80 feet deep, and it was transported down the Yuba River down here to the gold fields.
So that rock got it not only up there with hydraulic mining, but down here with dredge mining.
Right, they dredged it as well. Yeah, it's been well turned over.
Now we have come upon something totally unexpected as far as anything I was expecting to see here. Is this a lake? Is this part of the river? What is this?
Well, it's a dredger pond, but we've got water that flows in from the Yuba River through the training walls and through the dredger tailings into this pond, and that's what you see there.
So this is called a dredger pond.
Yeah, it's a dredger pond left behind by the dredging. You can see where the dredging occurred along the sides of it. Sure, and it's left here in the low spots, filled with water, and now it's, of course, fed also by water from the river.
So the river kind of has figured out ways to meander into these little spaces here.
There's a hydraulic connection between the river and these ponds.
Wow, and looking at these things, look at this water here. This is It looks like you could drink out of that.
Well, it's, of course, you know, it gets the filtration of going through, you know, hundreds of feet of rock, so it's very clear here.
Wow, this is amazing. And there, what, 20, 30, 40 of these things all throughout the
There's
gold
dozens
field?
and dozens of them like this, of various sizes in the gold fields.
Any fish in here?
There's fish, a lot of waterfowl use, a lot of bird use. You have beaver, otter.
So isn't it interesting how life has a way of re-emerging in the middle of all this desolation?
Definitely. Actually, these little microcosms, these little areas here of habitat, you know, are full of wildlife.
Continuing our gold fields adventure, Dean, actually, we've kind of come to a spot that's, here's BLM and here's private land over here. It's all kind of mixed in together.
Right, it is. There's about 1,500 acres of BLM land, and of course there's private land as well.
Okay, and that gives us the opportunity to meet up with Tony. Introduce yourself.
I'm Tony Massey with Cal Sierra Development.
Now, Cal Sierra Development is in direct lineage to those original companies that dredged and mined out here starting in the early 1900s, isn't it?
Yeah, since 1903, Yuba Manufacturing and Yuba Consolidated were actually a descendant of that company.
Okay, absolutely. And that gives us the opportunity, because it's one thing to look at old pictures of those huge dredges. It's another to see one up close and personal. And that's what we're doing right here, because here it is, this amazing, huge dredge. I don't know what I expected, Tony, but this is actually kind of overwhelming when you're standing here beside of it. Tell us a little bit about what we're looking at.
Well, this is Yuba Dredge number 17. It was originally built in 1917. It's 450 feet long, 105 feet tall, and weighs 3,500 tons.
Wow.
This thing can actually mine about 5 million tons of material a year.
Now, it's been sitting here, working here in these gold fields since 1917.
Yeah, and it operated pretty much continuously, other than a few rebuilds in the mid-50s. And then in 1967, they shut this one down for the last time.
Wow, this is... Now how would they build something like this?
Well, they build it on a dry dock, just like they do a ship in the ocean. And
Like right up here.
They would build it on a flat, and once they built the hull so it'll hold water, then they would just launch it into the water and then finish building the dredge and put all the components on it and then fire it up right where it's at. And basically it digs its own pond, and as it mines, it digs the material in front of it down to a depth of about, for this particular dredge, 115 feet, and then it deposits it behind it, and that's why you see all these tailings here.
So where would it have gone? Would it have gone down this way, down the pond here?
Yeah, actually this dredge shut down in 1967 right over there where you see the tailings stop.
So it would have been taking tailings all the way down here. I mean, it did a lot of work in its day.
Yeah, this dredge, I don't think it ever got under 5 million cubic yards, actually 7 million tons a year.
And would you have ever heard one of these things operating? What did they sound like?
You can hear these things operating in Marysville 7 miles away.
Really? What is the sound?
It's just a high-pitched squeaking sound that those buckets make when they go over the tumbler. There's no way to lubricate it because it's underwater and you can't get oil in the water. And but they are a noisy machine.
You're nodding. You've heard it yourself.
I have. It's an amazing sound. It's an amazing machine. It's just huge.
It actually only takes 4 people to operate one this size, but it takes about 40 people to support it. When they're running, you hear that squeaking noise, but they're all electric, so you don't hear any motors or any noise, engines or anything like that. It's just electric, but you hear the squeaking of the buckets and then the rocks, of course, going through the dredge.
But in the early days, in 1903, 1904, they would have been out in the middle of nowhere out here, and they would have been they would have been dredging for gold. I mean, this was big time stuff going on out
Yeah, they had all these dredges working at one time here in the gold fields.
How many?
They had 12 at one time working in the gold fields.
12 that big, working all around these fields.
There was several of them this size. Of course, there were a lot of smaller ones too, clear back from steam powered, and wooden hull, which this is a steel hull.
All right, now show us how this would work. Where's the front of this thing? I can't tell.
That's the front.
Oh, that's the front down here.
And this particular dredge that we've taken the bucket line off. So normally you see the buckets on that big digging ladder, and that thing drops underwater, of course, scoops up the material, and then it goes up and it gets dumped into a processing plant. Well, all the gold is processed on the dredge, and then once they get the gold out of it, the rock goes back on that big long stacker and gets deposited behind us.
And so all of the rock would be dropping off that conveyor belt there and forming these big tailing piles.
That's correct.
Wow. Do you ever get tired of coming out here looking at this?
I never get tired of seeing it. It's just implements you don't get to see very often. Anything that's that big and has been, has such an effect on the landscape.
You know, I don't think there are over 5,000 people in California who've ever seen this thing, are there?
No, not.
I mean, this is pretty obscure.
There's a lot of people right here in the area that don't even know these dredges are out here.
Is this literally the last dredge floating today in California?
This is the last one in California that's floating.
That was built in 1917.
Yeah.
And it's still floating today.
Yeah, with no leaks.
I don't want to leave this place. I mean, look at it sitting over there, this huge, magnificent, rusty, deserted old dredge sitting there on the water. It's been there since 1917. It was an engineering feat when it was built back then. It's still an engineering feat today. And it is both literally and figuratively a fine example, about the best I can think of California's gold and everything it was all about. No visit to the gold fields would be complete without a trip into town, but Tony, this isn't very much of a town right here, but it used to be.
Yeah, this is what's left of the Hammonton, or Hammond Town it was called. There was 5,000 people living here when all the dredges were really going strong up until the late 60s.
5,000 people were living right here, and what were they all connected in some way or another with the dredging operation and the fields and all of that?
Yeah, it was a mining town. They had their own store, their own school, swimming pool, pretty much self-contained little town.
And what happened to it? There's nothing here.
Well, in the late 60s when they shut all the dredges down, this was a mining town, so the people didn't stay here, and then they sold all the houses. Most of the people that were living in the houses were able to buy all their houses for $1 a piece, and then they moved them off the property.
You're kidding.
And there's still some standing today.
So there are bits and pieces of this old mining town all over this part of California. They're just not where they used to be.
Yeah, exactly.
Isn't that original?
That's the original water tower, still standing.
Wow. And the memories these vacant lots could tell, because we're standing right in the middle of what used to be town, aren't we?
Yeah, this was actually the big machine shop area where we're at now, and most of the living part of the town was to the east of us.
Wow. Do they ever have reunions? Do people ever come back?
Yeah, we just had a reunion about 4 months ago.
And how many people showed up?
About 300.
Really?
Yeah, it was quite a turnout.
Well, it used to be a big deal. Now it's a ghost town. But I guess the memories are still around.
Yeah, a lot of memories here.
Well, we're ending our day-long adventure right about where we started it, standing up here on this amazing overlook that looks out over these gold fields. And Dean, even though they're very historic, when I look at these things, I guess when most people look at them, they just see big piles of rock, tailings, as far as the eye can see. When you look at it, you see something else, don't you?
I do. I really see, number one, an opportunity for a lot of economic restoration, economic benefit to local communities through mining this in a certain way that allows us to restore the land. So when I look at it and I look into the future, I see ponds and islands and peninsulas and wildlife and people recreating. and this land being productive again in a different way, although we've extracted the economic benefits from it twice.
Now, what are you talking about?
Well, we would sell this sand and gravel, have the mining companies come in, bring these tailing piles down to more normal elevation, and then develop an inner juxtaposition between water and land to create wildlife habitat, fisheries habitat, and a park-like setting that the public can enjoy.
So you're talking about taking all this rock away and using it for aggregate, for rock, for economic uses in today's California.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I see this as being very important to the construction industry around the state. This is a huge deposition of sand and gravel, and we can extract it, use it to public benefit at the same time we restore the land, and it's a double win.
So you could bring in big shovels and trucks and take this back down to the way it was 100 years ago.
I think so, and many of the mining companies are very interested in doing it.
Wow, what a great, now is that a dream? Is that a far-fetched dream, or is that a practical dream?
It's a practical dream. We have to start on a small scale. You can see, I mean, we're not going to tackle 10,000 acres or 5,000 acres in an instant, but over time I think it's going to happen, and it's going to be the major setting here for the local community is the Yuba Gold fields.
Wow, and you'll leave some of them just for historic recognition so people will remember what was here.
Absolutely. In fact, that's part of the plan, is to wrap the history of this into the restoration and the utilization of it in the future.
Wow, what a great plan for this area. Thank you very much. Of course, this is all open to the public today. They can come in and wander around and enjoy this area today.
The public lands here are open to the public. Not all the gold fields is public, but those that are open for their use, and we've seen some today, of course.
Good old BLM, Bureau of Land Management land, which means it belongs to all of us. It's here for all of us to enjoy these historic and still potentially very rich areas in here called the Yuba
Gold fields.
Yuba Gold fields. These gold fields definitely one of California's golden parks.
I love you, California. You're the greatest state of all. I love you in the winter, summer, spring, and in the fall. I love your fertile valleys, your dear mountains I adore. I love your grand old ocean, and I love a rugged shore. Where snow-crowned golden sierras keep their watch for the valleys blue. It is there I would be, in a land by the sea, every breeze bearing rich perfume. It is here nature gives of her rarest. It is home, sweet home to me. And I know when I die, I shall breathe my last sigh for my sunny California.
Well, hello everybody, I'm Huell Hauser, and I sure hope you had as much fun as I did visiting the historic Yuba Gold fields near Marysville. If you'd like to go on this adventure again, share it with your family or friends, or perhaps donate a copy to your local school or library. It's available on video cassette and on DVD. All you have to do is call 1-800-266-5727, and we'll be glad to send it to you right away.
This presentation of California's Golden Parks was made possible by Toyota, who wants you to get out and see these incredible parks for yourself. Toyota is committed to preserving their natural beauty with its hybrid synergy drive technology in vehicles like the Prius, Highlander Hybrid, and Camry Hybrid. Lower emissions and higher gas mileage help hybrid synergy drive vehicles have a minimal impact on our natural wonders. We'll see you next time on California's Golden Parks.
Hello everybody, I'm Huell Hauser, and here we are on the side of Highway 1, about 30 miles north of Santa Cruz. We were heading down the highway and we saw this field of flowers and just had to pull over and get out and get right out in the middle of it. I'm not sure what kind of flowers they are. They smell great. I'm not sure why they're here, but they're here. And this is a perfect example of the kinds of things we find as we're traveling our state from one end to the other in search of its history and diversity and natural wonders. And this spot is a perfect spot to reissue our ongoing invitation to every one of you to join us as we continue our search together all over our state for California's gold. It doesn't get any prettier than this. This is what California is all about.